Growing up mixed race, queer and non-binary, never really seeing someone who looked like me or identified as the same things as me in like traditional media growing up, and just not knowing that like that was okay. I had been going through a really tough time. Like the folk industry is just full of white faces. If you're not a person of colour, you don't think about it. There was a long time where I was just playing with like indie bands and I did not fit on any lineups at all. Just creating a community of people, making people feel like they're safe and included, and all the feelings that I never had growing up, I want to give that to someone else. I think that's helped me create this brand.
Hello and welcome back to Sound Advice. I'm joined by Zara Smile. Zara, how are you?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm good. It's really good to see you. So we're going to talk a little bit about your experience as a mixed race queer person in the music industry and how that sort of affects your experience of things. But I think just to start off, how did you sort of get into music in the first place, and sort of what's your musical journey a little bit?
I remember hearing Adele's Someone Like You and wanting to be able to play it on the piano. And so I asked for piano lessons and here I am. Basically. I did like musical theatre school, like Stagecoach as well when I was younger, and that's sort of where I like to sing. And I sort of just combined the two together. And I started playing guitar in lockdown as well. And I've been writing songs for as long as I can remember. So all those kind of fit in together, and here I am.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have a story like that. I think, I can't exactly remember mine, but I feel like Hey There Delilah was one of them. There were like a load of songs that you just like, I really want to play that, and then it gets you into it, and then you get sucked in, I guess.
Yeah.
So tell me, just give me sort of an overview of like your career so far as a solo artist.
So I've been Zara Smile for I'd say about 6 years now. I actually originally released Happy and another song that is not out anymore under the name just Zara, like in the very beginning of lockdown, and those got removed because they sounded awful production wise. I was still learning, to be fair, so
I've been there, don't worry.
Yeah. And then I was like gigging and I had loads of songs written, and in like first year of uni, so about 2 years ago, I decided to release an EP. And that took 2 years, I think, to produce in full. There's a lot of like bumps along the road, and I was producing it all myself, and my time management wasn't as good back then. But I released my first single, Happy, in February of last year. Oh my god, that sounds
crazy.
Yeah. And then, I released the EP in May, and since then I've released 2 more singles as well. I'm a releasing machine. Yeah. I just write a song and I'm like, okay, I want it to be out right now.
I really like, as you said, releasing machine, that you started really strong, and then you were like, releasing machine.
Yeah.
Did I just say releasing machine?
I was like, oh yeah.
I like it, don't worry. So your latest release from the Release Machine is Spotlight. Can you tell me a bit more about that song and what it's about?
Yeah. So Spotlight was about growing up mixed race, queer and non-binary and all that fun stuff, and never really seeing someone who looked like me or like identified as the same things as me in like traditional media growing up. So like never seeing queer people on like CBBC, for example, and just not knowing that like that was okay. I mean, it was definitely due to the time, because I think now it's a lot more representative. But like having to find my own communities online, like someone like Tumblr and Twitter, which were interesting spaces to be in 2014. And like how that's like shaped me as a person. And also like the expectation that like specifically women of color have to be like quiet or expected to be like a certain way, and how that works like in my life now, and like how I see like my family members and everyone like acting in certain ways to like fit in with society's expectations. Yeah, a lot in the song.
You can hear it. It's a really powerful song.
Yeah, I was very angry.
Yeah. Well, you did mention, I saw on your social media, you mentioned that you wrote Spotlight and, was it Happy?
Human,
that's the one, sorry.
Yeah.
On the same day, and they both sort of have a similar sort of angry, I don't know why I thought Happy would have the angry vibe. But they have the similar sort of like anger that you're writing from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I don't know what was going on with me that day, but I was not a happy bunny. Yeah, and I was just a bit like fed up. I had been going through a really tough time in like January, February last year, and I just reached the end of it, and I was like, okay, something needs to change here. And so I wrote Human, which is about feeling rubbish. And then later on in the day, I was thinking about like why I feel rubbish, or like the expectations that I was like given to like deal with that. And I guess that's how Spotlight was born.
Yeah. Do you often find that sort of writing is like that outlet for you in terms of how you sort of express like anger and like sadness and things like that?
Absolutely. The songs just sort of come out of me. Like all the songs that all the songs that I've released, only one of them has been like a conscious, I'm going to sit down and write this right now.
Yeah.
The rest of them have just been like, I just sort of, the lyrics just pop into my head, and then, yeah.
Do you ever, I don't know if this is just me, I feel like other people may have said similar things, other people may disagree, but do you ever feel like you don't write the songs just sort of arrive? Like they get transmitted into your head and then you're like, oh, there's a song, and then you sort of finish it.
Yeah.
You add the bits that aren't there yet, but...
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah,
That's
they just sort of like arrive in my head, and I'm like, okay, this is the thing that I'm going to do now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know everyone's different, but I always prefer that than sitting down and thinking I'm going to write a song.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think it sort of comes more from your unconscious, and that's almost more true to yourself than what you might write if you were thinking about it.
Yeah, and also like I feel like I think of like the most clever metaphors and like little things like double meanings and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like in my subconscious, like I'll write something and be like, oh, that could also mean that. And it's like, oh, that's cool.
I think it just often comes from like things that like stick in your head that you've just like seen out and around, like just like a couple of people interacting, or like you see different things around as you just walk around the town or something, and then some things like stick in your head, images, anything really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I was gonna say about so when you write a song like Spotlight that is sort of, how you say, it's sort of angry at the world and the way that you feel like you've been underrepresented throughout, do you feel like in that case, do you feel like you're writing the song as like a means to an end, in terms of like you're writing to explain your feelings to yourself in a way, or do you almost feel like it's more to sort of provide this message to the world and to like evoke change?
I think when I first write the song, it's for myself.
Yeah.
I sort of go through a process of deciding whether I want to project the song to the world or not. And that one felt like it had an important message. So I was like, okay, this might do some good for someone. Someone out there who does feel underrepresented and finds me. But yeah, it's sort of like I go through like a process of deciding whether I want to show anyone else the songs. There's some songs that I've never shown anyone that I'm quite happy just sitting on. Yeah, they have their day. Yeah, they're waiting.
And those songs almost, I mean, I can't speak for you, but do those songs almost like exist as the therapy in themselves of like certain experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There are some songs that are just too personal. Or too specific actually as well. Yeah, like some songs that's too like,
they're gonna know I can't do that. Nah, I get that.
Yeah, gotta wait a couple of years.
Yeah, is it like a very conscious thing to want to, the sort of message of your songs that you release to be not necessarily all about like social change, but sort of to do with those kind of topics?
I guess, yeah. I think I write a lot about it because I think a lot about it. I mean, being in my position, just existing, I am political. And I think a lot of that is reflected in like the way I think and the way I act on a regular basis. And I feel like I was sort of almost like forced into like a political mindset. Obviously, like I do enjoy being political and I enjoy standing up for like social rights and stuff. But yeah, a lot of like the way that I am is because I was almost like forced into that position. So I guess it's what I spend a lot of my time thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, you've touched on similar themes throughout like your discography. Can you tell us a bit more about some of the different songs where you've talked about things that are like why it's like things outside of yourself rather than inside of yourself, I guess?
Yeah, so my first single, Happy, is about actually TikTok in lockdown. I found myself just scrolling for hours and hours and then found content that was like, oh, we all just seem to be scrolling for hours and hours with like no end. And so there's like some like clever little metaphors, if I do say so myself, about like dancing in circles, like the trend cycles. and like all like the TikTok dances that were going around at the time. So I guess that's sort of about how like TikTok was affecting all of our brains at that point.
Yeah.
And the like shared experience of spending like 7 hours a day on the app.
Yeah, 2020 TikTok was very weird.
My sister sent me like a TikTok about like 2019 TikTok yesterday, and it was like all the like reacting to like duets and stuff, and I was like, oh my god, this is so nice, it's so wholesome.
I think 2020 is like, if I remember rightly, that's when it like really exploded here in the UK as well. So I think before that it was Musically, I think.
Yeah, and it became TikTok in 2019.
But it still kind of had the Musically feel.
Yeah.
And then 2020 just really like exploded it.
Yeah, and it had like the deep TikTok and do you remember like straight TikTok and alt TikTok? It was that was a whole time. Oh my god. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I was writing about sort of mental health, another thing that you're sort of passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just because, again, they're just on my mind a lot of the time. If I'm feeling crap, I'm going to write about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's just sort of like, I think it's whatever I'm thinking about at the time.
Yeah.
Whatever seems to be on my mind. So I wrote Misplaced is a song about my gender identity and like coming to terms with that. And I wrote it as I was coming to terms with my gender identity. Yeah, it's just sort of whatever's going on in my life. It's all very like personal stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm getting, and this isn't a bad thing at all, but I'm getting just from a lot of the things we've spoken about today that sort of a lot of it comes very naturally and comes almost from your subconscious.
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
like say like the aesthetic that you were talking about on the previous episode and different things to do with like how you write songs. You're not sort of, you don't try and make art. You just sort of it happens.
Yeah, I think it's all just like come very naturally, and even like the content creation stuff, although like that's been more of a conscious thought, it's also come quite naturally because it is just me at the end of the day. My branding is it's just me. I am me, and and I make music, and that's sort of what I do.
I mean, I guess this is very cynical because it's obviously not why you sort of you sort of have quite a clear sense of your identity, and that maybe partly comes from being marginalised. It gives you more of that stronger sense in certain aspects. But I suppose, does that make it easier to brand stuff? Which it sounds very cynical.
No,
it's obviously not why you would be who you are, of course.
Yeah,
not. But like, do you find that gives you a route to sort of carve like a unique space for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think growing up mixed race, because I'm half Pakistani and half English, the difference in cultures is insane. There's so many, like the drinking culture here versus like not drinking, obviously, because Muslim. I kind of had to decide which way I was going to go on like each thing. I think that has like made me very like, also the fact that I'm very much autistic. So I like, I think I decided like very early on that like this is who I'm going to be. And it might have shifted very slightly like growing up, but I think I've stayed pretty much concrete in all those decisions, and I think that's helped me create this brand because it's kind of like based on those decisions I made when I was like 10 years old. Yeah,
I mean, you're reminding me of, I saw this really interesting exhibition at Facts like a year ago or so ago, and it was about this half Indian, half English woman who, and it was about sort of being caught in this liminal space between the sort of two identities where she almost didn't feel like she could connect fully with either. Is that something that you think you've experienced?
For years, I kept saying that I just feel like one big grey area because this is a time where I wasn't sure about my sexuality or my gender either. I just felt like I was just like in between everything. Just, not quite one way or the other. And
then that sort of, I suppose that kind of space kind of almost forces you to sort of define yourself because you feel in limbo a little bit, I suppose. Yeah,
and I guess like my need to like know which way I was going. That kind of like defined things. So like a big thing for me was deciding whether I wanted to drink or not, because like none of my family drank, but they were like, if you want to, that is fine. And I decided I didn't want to drink. And that was like quite a big decision for me because obviously it's impacted quite a lot. Yeah. Specifically, my bank account is flourishing. Well, more flourishing than it would be if I did drink. It's that was like a big decision that I was like, okay, I'm gonna choose to embrace this part of my culture in this circumstance, and then I can be a bit more lenient on this bit, and then and that's kind of like the way I've like figured out my stuff.
Do you find it difficult with drinking culture in, say, I mean, in the UK in general, but especially in the sort of the live music scene? Because it's something I was speaking to Nee Maxine about it.
Yeah.
And she doesn't drink either, and she was talking about how it can be very difficult when like everyone is at a gig and everyone's got a pint, and then you think you sort of feel a bit out of place, and you're sort of waiting for that part to end so that you can go and do something else, and then someone says, "Let's go to the pub."
Yeah.
Is that ever something that you struggle with?
I think because I've never drank ever, I've kind of just gotten used to it. So like I'll have like a little Monster with me, like a Monster energy drink. When everyone's drinking their pints, I'll be drinking a Monster. I've sort of like substituted it in my mind almost. So it's not like a huge deal for me, but I can like sometimes there's moments where like, oh, like if you went for a pint with this person, like I'm sure they'd like, you know, it's like networking kind of stuff. And like the like questions as well about it. If someone like makes a big deal out of it, it's always just like, oh, come on. Yeah.
I suppose just bringing it to a more sort of general thing in terms of your identity. How do you think your experiences in the music industry, and I suppose like meeting people, doing gigs, everything it entails, how do you think that's sort of been shaped by your identity?
A lot of what I do in music is platforming other people of color who are artists as well as me, and speaking about like the issues, because like especially the folk music industry is really heavily concentrated with white artists, and like bringing that to light. I know Leith Ross said in a TikTok a while back that like the folk industry is just full of white faces. And sort of like championing other people of color who are folk artists, as well as like my own music, and talking about it is like important, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that sort of just existing, you feel political. Do you think almost like you have the similar thing where just promoting your music feels like making a statement?
Yeah,
in a way?
Absolutely. Not to sound like so pretentious.
No, I don't think it is at all.
But yeah, it does feel like I don't know, it feels like I'm doing good.
Yeah.
In the world. Yeah. On a very low level, but I'm doing something.
Well, I mean, I suppose it doesn't really matter what the level is if you're just doing what you can and trying to make the scene and like the music industry in general a more equitable place, and that's always going to be a good thing, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it for me is like honing a community of people who are like-minded, and just finding people who are like me and sort of almost making friends with them.
Yeah.
And so like having like a little fan base on TikTok, I'm like, I want to be friends with all my all my fans. Yeah.
Do you think that sort of it's a cynical point of view. It's not that any of this would be intentional, but do you think it sort of allowed you to sort of connect with people on a platform like TikTok, where people can be inspired by you and connect with you, and it's almost touching on what you talk about in Spotlight, where you never felt like you were represented in media, and you did say mainstream media, but in media in general, I suppose that would also be true. And then people can come across your music and what you do and feel represented if they're from those communities.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about like just creating a community of people, and making people feel like they're safe and included, and all the feelings that I never had growing up, I want to give that to someone else. Yeah.
I think that's what's so great about your just platform in general, is that you write about those topics, and then you're able to sort of reduce the impact of that on other people with the community that you can build, which is an amazing thing.
Yeah, I guess it's all about relatability and just connecting with people.
Do you think, so putting on, you mentioned putting on your own events under Smile Promotions, is that a sort of similar part of wanting to build out a community of like-minded people?
Yeah, it's mostly about like platforming other people of colour, specifically artists of colour, and and like folk music as well within the Liverpool scene specifically. As there are a couple nights of folk, I've like found the little like entryway in now. But there was a long time where I was just playing with like indie bands, and I did not fit on any lineups at all. Yeah, and I felt like I had to change my set, and I was like, what is going on? Like, why is this music not happening here? And I think I've like, with Smile Promotions especially, I've like found my way in. yeah, so I think it's about just giving a platform to like both those things. And just creating more awareness about it, because I think a lot of people, if you're not a person of color, you don't think about it a lot of the time. Like, it is a conscious thought, whereas I will walk into a room and I will like spot people like me, either queer or people of color, like immediately as I walk into a room. So yeah, I think it just requires someone talking about it for there to be change.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's one of the things I really want to do with this podcast, to be honest, is sort of be able to cover and speak about different people's experiences and marginalised experiences in the industry and what that means, and also educate myself as well as anyone that might be watching about these things, because I think that's a good point that you just made, that I might not necessarily consciously walk into a room and immediately think to myself about the gender diversity that will be in a room. It'd be something that I might like think about consciously afterwards or like at the time, but it might, as you said, something that you would like immediately realise based on the experiences that you've had, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, the first gig I ever put on my EP release party, the whole lineup was women of colour. And it was just like, it was really cool to just see loads of like women of colour artists just doing their thing. And it's just, it was a really amazing night. And I want to put on more events like that. I
suppose it's kind of, it fits into that whole category of, if like there isn't a space for it, you build it yourself.
Absolutely,
Do you think you've been inspired by, like, I mean, there's promoters like Bitch Palace and people in Liverpool that do amazing work like that. Are they sort of people that you've been inspired by in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. Just like everyone really around who is championing for more diversity in the scene. I just love it all. Keep it coming.
I'm about to say, you've done some stuff with Where Are the Girl Bands as well?
Yes, they were my first gig in Liverpool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah. They're a really great organisation. So what do you think sort of Liverpool's local scene can do, besides sort of building a space yourself? What do you think Liverpool's local scene can do to be more accepting of people from marginalised backgrounds, do you think?
I guess just be aware of it, be aware of what's happening, and educating yourself. I guess not expecting people of colour to educate you about the problems going on, and having like an awareness of, okay, this is what's going on, this is how I can help. Just Googling, I guess.
Well, I mean, and I hope you don't feel like I've sort of been like, can you educate me?
No.
But I think it's part of the thing that, I do agree that like it's not your like job to educate people, but resources like this, hopefully being out there, will hopefully help. And there's something I'm definitely going to try and do a lot more.
It's like an entryway into the whole world of Yeah,
well, I mean, for both my own personal stuff and just for the general cause, I'm sort of hoping that you sort of, when you Google topics, when you Google this kind of topic, something like this will come up and show like a real conversation about these kind of issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about sort of the wider music industry? Is it just similar things of education, or is there anything else?
I think so, yeah. I think if people are more educated about it, there'll be more conversations about it. I think, honestly, the wider music industry is a little bit more diverse than the local scene. So there probably is conversations about it already. But just like talking about it and platforming artists of colour.
I suppose, do you think maybe, so say I don't know, Universal, because it's a much bigger organisation, there's much more diversity within that group, whereas if you say, for example, just a local promoter in Liverpool might be a 2-person operation at best, and then obviously in smaller numbers it's harder to have that diversity that sort of creates those conversations, because as you said, it's not something that a lot of people would sort of immediately unconsciously think about.
And like places like Universal have whole teams for diversity and inclusion, and obviously that's not something on a much smaller scale that you could do. Just sort of being aware of what's going on.
I suppose on a cynical level as well, someone like Universal will have like a brand point of view of wanting to appear diverse as well, whereas I suppose maybe in the local scene there's not as well, because as smaller companies maybe aren't as bothered sometimes about wanting to make a real effort towards that,
or just not thinking about it, not being aware that it's a problem.
I think part of the problem is that a lot of promoters may well think that they have a big enough audience putting on white artists and male artists. They can bring enough people doing that. So it's almost they might almost see it as a risk to change. But
Yeah.
what I think a lot of them don't realize is that there's, like you've been doing and like a lot of artists been doing, there's people building whole communities.
Yeah.
Because people who've been underrepresented have often a stronger sense of connection
Yeah, absolutely.
than one white man might have to another.
Yeah.
Because of the shared experiences and the things that they've gone through, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose the last point, if you could, in 5 years' time, what are you doing with your career or with Smile Promotions or anything like that?
What in 5 years would I like to be doing?
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah. I guess I'd like to just keep doing this, basically.
Yeah.
Keep writing songs, keep releasing music, potentially going on a tour.
Ooh.
Quite exciting. Yeah, and just like getting support slots for bigger artists is what I'm focusing on now. Yeah, and just having fun with it, basically. Just writing music, releasing it. Yeah.
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 Awesome.
Yeah.
Perfect answer. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on the show. Really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it.
Yeah.
And thank you for watching.